The millionaire wanted a perfect mom for his twin daughters in wheelchairs, but they chose the nanny and he was shocked. Before we begin today's story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you love emotional love stories, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That way, you help this work grow and motivate me to bring you more and more stories. A light rain had been falling since the early hours of the morning, painting the sky over San Diego in shades of gray. The droplets traced lines down the wide windows of the seaside mansion like persistent tears, creating a constant sound that mixed with the distant murmur of the waves. The ocean, once a companion of sunny days and family outings, now moved heavily, with tides that seemed to carry the same melancholy that haunted that home. The scent of sea air came through the cracks in the windows, blending with the faint aroma of coffee from the kitchen, but even that wasn't enough to warm the atmosphere. The interior of the mansion, impeccably decorated, reflected a cold luxury. The white walls, imposing columns and marble floors glistened in the soft light, but there was no human warmth. Well-positioned paintings, designer furniture, and crystal. Chandeliers looked like items in a private museum, perfectly arranged, yet lifeless. The silence was broken only by the echo of Ethan Caldwell's own footsteps as he slowly walked through the living room. Ethan, a 37-year-old man, tall, broad-shouldered, and with naturally upright posture, looked different. His body still carried the athletic build of someone who always cared for his appearance, and his fair skin, lightly tanned, hinted at days in the sun. But his blue-gray eyes, once vibrant and full of ambition, were now clouded, bearing a weight that wouldn't lift. He wore a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and his tie hung loosely around his neck as if he'd given up maintaining his usual neatness. As he approached the fireplace, he stopped in front of a framed photo. In it, his wife smiled, her light brown hair flying in the wind as she held Lily and Sophie, still small, in her arms. The background was the same beach he now avoided looking at through the window. He stood there for a few seconds, unmoving, before murmuring softly, as if confessing to the image, "I promised to take care of them, but I don't know if I'm managing." Upstairs, the soft sound of wheelchair wheels approached. Lily, 7 years old, with fair skin and dark brown hair tied in a delicate braid, pushed her sister's chair. Sophie, with golden blonde curls and grayish-green eyes, watched in silence, hugging a rag doll. The two shared a quiet bond, but in their eyes was a seriousness that didn't match their age. "Daddy, are you coming down for breakfast?" Lily asked in a timid voice, as if not wanting to interrupt his thoughts. Ethan took a deep breath and forced a small smile. "I'll be right there, sweetheart." In the kitchen, the housekeeper had prepared pancakes, coffee, and fresh juice. The girls sat side by side at the massive wooden table, but there was no cheerful chatter. Only the sound of cutlery on plates filled the space. Ethan sat at the head of the table and tried to start a conversation. "Did you sleep well?" Sophie kept her eyes on her plate before replying in a low voice, "I dreamed about Mommy. She was at the beach with us." The silence that followed was almost tangible. Ethan felt a knot in his chest and looked away toward the window where the sea churned. Every time her name was spoken, the atmosphere seemed to shift, as if her absence became even more pronounced. After breakfast, he took the girls to the glassed-in porch. The view of the ocean stretched before them, vast and unforgiving. Ethan knelt beside his daughters, resting his hand on the back of their chairs, and spoke in a soft tone. "One day, we'll go back to the beach together. I promise." But as he gazed at the horizon, he knew that it wasn't just her physical absence that haunted him. It was the silent fear of slowly losing his daughter's laughter and hope, and not knowing how to get them back. It was a sunny day, But the light pouring into Ethan Caldwell's office couldn't dispel the shadow of worry that had settled over him. Seated behind a large mahogany desk, surrounded by shelves filled with books, awards, and trophies, he slowly flipped through a folder containing documents and printed profiles. Carefully organized within were the details of several women who, in his mind, might fit the role of the ideal mother for Lily and Sophie. To Ethan, this decision wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. He believed that, in order for his daughters to recover from grief, they needed a maternal figure who would not only care for them, but also match the world they belonged to. In his view, this woman had to be elegant, educated, accustomed to the high society events of San Diego, someone who could move confidently among entrepreneurs and philanthropists, smile for cameras, and represent the family with perfection. Deep down, part of this search was also about his own image, the desire to preserve the flawless reputation he had built over years in the business world. As he ran his fingers across the pages, Ethan paused on the polished photo of a candidate, examining her perfectly aligned smile, expensive dress, and rehearsed posture. Yet an uneasy feeling stirred in his chest. He shook his head, brushing the thought away, and continued reviewing the profiles. At that moment, the office door opened and Richard, his longtime friend and business partner, walked in without knocking. Richard, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a tailored suit, always spoke bluntly. "You're still at this?" he asked, glancing at the desk cluttered with papers. Ethan leaned back in his chair, releasing a controlled sigh. "I am. The girls need a mother figure. They can't keep living in this void." Richard rested his hands on the desk and leaned forward slightly. "You're treating this like a hiring process. But that's not how it works. You can't measure affection by resume or pedigree." Ethan frowned. "It's not just about affection. It's about stability, security, and yes, keeping everything in place. They need someone who can represent them, who fits into the world they're going to grow up in." Richard shook his head in disbelief but didn't press further. As he left, the housekeeper, Mrs. Collins, appeared at the door. "Mr. Caldwell, if I may, one know a few women from the community who would be perfect for the role. Traditional families, discreet, well-positioned. I can arrange introductions." Ethan nodded. "Do it." In the following days, he began attending charity events, exclusive dinners, and cocktail parties in luxury hotels, always on the lookout. He wore his sharpest suits, mingled with light, elegant conversation, but internally, he evaluated each candidate like a major business negotiation. He noted posture, table manners, how they spoke with strangers, how they reacted to talk about philanthropy or international travel. At one such event, held on the terrace of a beachfront hotel, he observed a group of women laughing politely, champagne flutes in hand. Everything about them seemed perfect. The dresses, the hairstyles, the carefully chosen words. But as the night breeze blew in, Ethan noticed something. There was no real warmth, only formality. None of those polished presences made him picture his daughters truly smiling. The soft buzz of his phone pulled him from his thoughts. It was a call from the temporary nanny. He answered and heard Lily's voice on speakerphone. "Daddy, will you be home soon? The house feels sad when you're not here." Her words echoed louder than any of the elegant conversations around him. He ended the call slowly, sat in silence for a few seconds, and realized that maybe what he was looking for wasn't in that room. But true to his plan, he still wasn't ready to admit it, at least not yet. The morning was clear, but the air carried that typical San Diego chill of early autumn, the kind of weather that makes sunlight feel more distant. Ethan Caldwell sat in the living room, reviewing a list of candidates for the temporary nanny position. He had already interviewed several women, all impeccable on paper, with strong resumes. experience in prestigious families, and the kind of poise that fits seamlessly into the world of high society. Yet something about them always felt artificial. They were polite, kind, but there was a coldness in their gestures, a distance that many wouldn't notice, but he did. And more importantly, so did Lily and Sophie, who remained expressionless during the introductions. Mrs. Collins, the housekeeper, appeared at the doorway with a clipboard in hand. "Mr. Caldwell, the next candidate has arrived. She's not exactly the usual profile." Ethan looked up from the paper, intrigued. "Not the usual profile? What do you mean?" "She was recommended by a friend of mine from church. She volunteered at a children's shelter. Doesn't have experience with families of your standard." He hesitated for a moment. "Send her in." The door opened, and for a moment, the atmosphere in the room seemed to shift. Claire Bennett walked in carrying a worn folder and a simple shoulder bag. She was 28, of medium height, slim build, fair skin dotted with light freckles across her cheeks and nose, honey blonde wavy hair falling to her shoulders, and grayish-green eyes that radiated both warmth and strength. She wore a cream-colored blouse made of light fabric, well-kept blue jeans, and a brown wool coat. Clearly old, but clean and tidy. There was no trace of ostentation in her appearance, just genuine care for herself. "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell. Thank you for seeing me," she said, with an open smile that didn't feel rehearsed. He gestured for her to sit. "So, Claire, why do you want this job?" "Because I know how to care, not just in the practical sense. I know how to listen, how to create a safe space. And I believe kids can tell when someone really cares," she replied without hesitation, holding his gaze steadily as they talked. A sound from upstairs caught their attention, the familiar noise of wheelchair wheels descending the ramp. Lily appeared first, curious, followed by Sophie, who watched timidly. Claire stood up right away and crouched down to their level. "Hi, you must be Lily and Sophie." "I'm Claire," she said gently. Lily tilted her head. "Do you know how to play castle?" Claire smiled. "Only if you're the queens. And I can be the castle builder." Both girls giggled, and Ethan, watching the scene unfold, noticed something rare, the genuine laughter of his daughters filling the room. Claire, instinctively, began interacting with them without pushing herself into their space. She asked about their favorite toys, the books they liked, and listened closely to every answer as if nothing else mattered. Ethan, used to seeing the girls shy and withdrawn around strangers, was surprised by how quickly Claire had connected with them. Still, he kept his tone neutral. "Can you stay with them this afternoon while I handle a few things in the office?" "Of course," she replied naturally. When he returned a few hours later, he found the living room transformed, cushions on the floor forming a moat to protect a block-built castle, dolls scattered around as imaginary citizens and colorful drawings taped to the walls. Sophie, who rarely smiled, was laughing at something Claire had said, while Lily played the part of a queen giving orders to an invisible army. For a moment, Ethan didn't walk in. He just stood there in the doorway, watching. There was something in that scene you couldn't buy, something you couldn't hire. "It's time for you to go now, Claire," he said at last, stepping into the room. She helped the girls settle into their chairs and grabbed her bag. "It was a pleasure, girls. See you tomorrow. You'll come back, right?" Lily asked, holding her hand. Claire looked at Ethan before answering, and her smile was sincere. "If it's up to me, yes." As the door closed behind her, Ethan realized that, even though he kept telling himself Claire was just a temporary solution, a part of him already knew letting her go wouldn't be as simple as he had imagined. The sound of laughter had returned to the Caldwell mansion, and not the polite, restrained kind, but spontaneous bursts that echoed through the halls. and broke the heavy silence that once ruled the place. Claire, with her warm presence, had transformed the girls' routine into something vibrant and alive. Mornings were no longer dull. They began with soft music in the kitchen, pancakes made together, and cheerful conversations about what adventure they'd create that day. Lily and Sophie, once withdrawn, had begun to open up more and more. In the afternoons, the sound of wheelchair wheels in the garden mingled with the cries of seagulls from the sea. Claire encouraged imaginative play, read books with lively interpretations, and led adaptive physical therapy sessions that, though demanding, felt like games. She turned the exercises into superhero challenges where every movement was a mission accomplished. Ethan watched, often from a distance. He saw Sophie, who used to rarely smile, now laughing until she was out of breath. He saw Lily, once so shy, now telling made-up stories with excitement in her eyes. And while it comforted him to see his daughters happy again, it also stirred a discomfort that grew by the day. Not because Claire was doing anything wrong, quite the opposite, but because she was becoming central to the girls' lives. And that threatened the plan he had crafted for the family. One Saturday morning during breakfast, Lily mentioned casually, with eyes glowing, "Daddy, did you know Claire's going to teach us how to make cookies just like her grandma?" "Used to?" She said the kitchen's going to smell like her childhood home. Ethan set his cup down on the saucer harder than he meant to, the sharp clink catching everyone's attention. "Lily, you girls know Claire is only here temporarily, right?" Sophie, stirring her juice with a straw, looked up and said firmly, "But she's the best, Daddy. Better than all the others." Those words, said with such conviction, echoed in his mind for the rest of the day. Later that afternoon, Ethan came home early from the office. Passing by the glassed-in veranda, he stopped. Claire was with the girls at the therapy bars. "That's it, Sophie. Just a little more perfect. Now breathe deep, just like we practiced," she said, her tone full of patience and real encouragement. Lily clapped, celebrating her sister's progress. Ethan couldn't look away. It wasn't just dedication. There was a kind of care in Claire's guidance that felt beyond duty, as if every accomplishment of the girls was also hers. When she noticed him, Claire straightened and smiled. "You're home early. The girls are doing really well, don't you think?" He took a breath before answering, "Yes, they are." "Maybe too well," Claire frowned slightly. "Too well? What do you mean?" "I just hope they're not getting the wrong idea," he said, gazing out at the sea through the glass. She stepped closer, resting her hand gently on the back of Lily's chair. "Mr. Caldwell, children don't confuse affection with replacement. They know who their mother is. I'm just here to care for them." Ethan didn't respond. But that night, lying alone, he realized the problem wasn't that the girls might be confused about their feelings. What truly unsettled him was the growing sense that he was starting to see Claire in a way that had no place in any of his plans. The Caldwell Mansion's dining room had been set as if for a solemn occasion. A grand crystal chandelier hung above the long table, casting a warm golden glow over the pristine white linen tablecloth, elegant white floral arrangements, and tall flickering candles. Silver cutlery gleamed, crystal glasses caught sparks of light, and each fine porcelain plate looked like it belonged in a museum. Ethan had planned every detail of the evening, not for himself, but to reinforce in his daughters' minds the image of the woman he believed was the ideal candidate to be their mother. Seated to his right was Victoria Hawley, heiress of a traditional and influential family in San Diego high society. Tall, slender, with flawless posture, she wore a navy blue classic-cut dress, a pearl necklace, and her platinum blonde hair in an elegant bun. Her movements were precise, her smile measured, her tone composed, and while everything about her exuded sophistication, There was one thing she lacked: genuine warmth. The twins entered the room pushed by Claire, who wore a beige midi skirt and a long-sleeved white blouse. Her smile was soft, but a subtle restraint showed, as if she knew her place that night was only to assist. Lily and Sophie, dressed in matching cream lace dresses, approached the table hesitantly but relaxed. As soon as they felt Claire's hand gently resting on their shoulders. "Girls, this is Victoria. She's traveled to more than 20 countries and has some amazing stories to tell," Ethan said. Trying to initiate conversation, Victoria leaned forward slightly, maintaining her polished smile. "Maybe one day we can travel together. Would you girls like to visit Europe?" Lily shrugged, casting a quick glance at Claire before replying, "We already like the stories Claire tells about the shelter and the kids there." A brief silence fell over the table. Victoria kept smiling, but turned her gaze to her wine glass, clearly unsure of how to respond. Ethan cleared his throat and tried to redirect. "Victoria also rides horses. Maybe she can take you on a ride someday." Sophie shook her head, her voice coming out firm. "I don't want to ride horses. I want to keep learning how to bake with Claire." The girl's words began to crack the carefully constructed atmosphere Ethan had envisioned. He felt a flush rise up his neck but kept his composure. The dinner went on, though every attempt to highlight Victoria was subtly redirected to shared moments with Claire. Then, during dessert, Lily set her fork down and said with the innocent bluntness only a child can manage, "Daddy, we've already chosen who we want as our mom." The air seemed to thin. Ethan, still holding his fork, remained composed and asked, "Oh, and who would that be?" Both girls replied in unison without hesitation, "Claire." Her name echoed through the room like a revelation that could no longer be ignored. Claire, visibly uncomfortable, looked down and bit her lip gently, while Victoria leaned back in her chair, shooting Ethan a glance that blended surprise with disdain. "Girls, that's not something we decide over dinner," Ethan said, his voice low but tight with tension. Sophie took her sister's hand and, facing her father, added, "But we know. She takes care of us like she's our mom. And she talks about mommy like she's still with us." That sentence hit Ethan like a blow. It wasn't just innocent attachment. It was the raw truth he had been trying not to see. And at the same time, it wounded his pride, laying bare that all his effort to craft the perfect plan for his family was crumbling in the face of reality. The dinner ended under a heavy cloud. Victoria said goodbye with cool detachment. Claire quietly gathered the dishes, and Ethan remained seated for a while, staring into nothing, realizing that something inside him, something he wasn't ready to admit, was about to change forever. The day after the dinner felt strange at the Caldwell mansion. The twins woke up cheerful as if nothing had happened, but Ethan spent the morning locked in his office, staring blankly at his computer screen. He couldn't shake the scene from the night before, Claire's name spoken by his daughters with such certainty as if no other option in the world existed. To him, it was dangerous. If he allowed that bond to deepen any further, his carefully crafted, rational plan to rebuild the family would fall apart. When he finally called Claire in to talk, his voice already carried the weight of a decision made. She entered the office smiling, holding a sketchbook filled with the girls' drawings. "They want to show you these after lunch. They're really proud of them." Ethan looked away, adjusting his tie. "Claire, I need to talk to you about a change." She furrowed her brows. "A change?" "Yes, I think it's time we reorganize the girls' routines. I've found other options, and I believe it's what's best for them." Claire took a few seconds to process his words. "You're firing me?" "I'd prefer to say the job has come to an end," he replied, trying to keep his tone even. Her eyes shimmered, not with anger, but with pure heartbreak. And what am I supposed to do with the bond we've built? With everything they've accomplished these past few months? I'm grateful for everything you've done. But this is for the best, Claire. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. When the time came for her to leave, Claire went up to the girls' room. They were on the floor playing with dolls, but stopped the moment they saw her with her coat folded over her arm. "You're going somewhere?" Lily asked, already sensing what was happening. Claire knelt down to their level. "Yes, but not because I want to. It's because things have changed. But I want you to know I'll never forget you." Sophie clutched her hand tightly. "You promised you'd stay." Claire took a deep breath, fighting back tears. "I promise that even from far away, I'll always be cheering for you. Always." Lily leaned in and hugged her tightly around the neck, crying softly. Sophie followed, and for a moment, Claire felt like the world was taking something from her that it never should have. When she stood, the girls wouldn't let go of her hands until she reached the door. Ethan stood at a distance, his jaw clenched. He told himself this was the right thing to do. But deep down, a bitter doubt was beginning to settle in. The door closed softly behind her, and the silence that took over the mansion was heavier than it had ever been. Even before Claire arrived, winter had already given way to spring when Ethan Caldwell, somewhat reluctantly, accepted the invitation to attend a charity event hosted by a foundation supporting children with physical disabilities. The main hall of a community center in Loyola was decorated with colorful banners and tables covered in games, books, and physical therapy equipment. He walked among the guests, exchanging polite greetings until a familiar voice, light and cheerful, cut through the background noise. He turned, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. In the corner of the gym, Claire knelt beside a young girl in a wheelchair, carefully adjusting the leg braces while encouraging her. "That's it. Breathe. Just one more step with the bar. You've got this." The girl, focused, moved a few inches forward and smiled proudly. Claire responded with a smile so radiant it lit up the whole room. Ethan stood frozen, watching her interact. She moved from child to child with the same attention, calling each by name, remembering details of their lives, celebrating small victories like they were monumental achievements. There was no rush, no impatience. This wasn't a woman trying to replace anyone. It was someone who understood the importance of honoring stories, including the ones that were no longer present. A volunteer approached Ethan, unaware of who he was. "She's amazing, isn't she? No matter the kid's condition, she always finds a way to make them believe in themselves." Ethan swallowed hard. Yes, she is. As he watched her, memories of his daughter's goodbye flooded back. The tight hugs, the silent tears, Claire's eyes trying to mask the pain. Now, seeing her there, he realized what he hadn't before. Claire didn't just care, she preserved. She spoke of each family as if she were a part of them, but without ever erasing memories or overstepping her place. When she finally noticed him, her eyes widened slightly. She stood slowly and walked over to him, her smile polite but reserved. "Mr. Caldwell, I didn't expect to see you here." "Neither did I," he replied, his voice softer than he intended. Claire crossed her arms, a subtle self-protective gesture. "Are the girls okay?" "They are, but they miss you." "More than I expected?" A brief silence settled between them, broken only by the sound of a wheelchair rolling behind them. Ethan took a breath. "Claire, I think I made a mistake." She looked away, but there was no bitterness in her face, only calm resolve. "Ethan, it's not about what you think now. It's about what's best for them." And in that moment, looking at her, Ethan felt something far deeper than gratitude. It was a mix of admiration, respect, and a quiet pull, a kind of affection he could no longer rationalize away. And for the first time, he wasn't sure he still wanted to follow the plan he had fought so hard to defend. That night, the sound of the ocean drifted softly through the open windows of the twins' bedroom, blending with the gentle flutter of the white curtains moving in the breeze. Ethan, still wearing the same shirt from the event, now wrinkled, the top buttons undone, stepped in to say goodnight. He found Lily and Sophie sitting side by side on Sophie's bed, an open photo album resting on their laps. The warm lighting gave the room a quiet, intimate feel, casting a golden glow over the pages filled with memories of their mother. Lily looked up the moment she saw him. "Daddy, we heard you saw Claire today." He approached and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Yes, I saw her. She was helping children at a charity event." Sophie slowly closed the album, as if each page weighed more than the last. "Are you going to bring her back?" Ethan hesitated, looking at them both. "Girls, it's not that simple." Lily gripped his hand tightly, her blue eyes gleaming with determination. "It is for us. When she's here, it feels like Mommy's here too. Because Claire talks about her like she still matters. Like she's still part of our lives." Sophie nodded, her eyes brimming. "She never tried to be our mom, but she always reminded us how much Mom loved us. Nobody else ever did that, Daddy. Nobody." The weight of those words hit Ethan like a silent blow. It wasn't just childlike nostalgia. It was the raw, honest truth he had refused to face. He ran a hand through his hair, took a deep breath, and felt a tightness in his chest that he could no longer hide. "You know I've always wanted what's best for you, right?" "Then listen to what we're saying," Lily insisted, her voice trembling. "The best isn't someone who dresses fancy or who other people think is perfect. The best is someone who really cares." Ethan sat in silence, gazing at his daughters. For months, every decision had been measured by status, appearance, and what would look right from the outside. But now, faced with these two small and yet impossibly wise girls, he realized just how far he had strayed from what truly mattered. Sophie leaned her head against his arm and whispered, "If you bring Claire back, we promise we'll try even harder in therapy, just so she can see how strong we're getting." He closed his eyes, feeling their small hands wrapped around his. That gesture carried more truth than any meeting or contract he had ever signed. And when he opened them, their eyes were fixed on him, not just hopeful, but gently urgent. He could feel it. Maybe he didn't have much time to make things right. "I'll think about it. But I promise I'll really think about it," he said at last. And he knew that promise wasn't just to ease their hearts. It was a commitment to himself to rethink everything he believed about love, about family, and about what's truly worth holding on to. As he turned off the lights and stepped out, the sound of the sea grew louder, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for the decision he now had no choice but to make. That morning, the Caldwell mansion felt different. There was no visible change, and yet something had shifted. It was in the air, in the way the sunlight filtered through the windows, in how the silence that used to weigh heavy now carried a strange, hopeful vibration. Mrs. Collins moved around the house, straightening already perfect pillows, wiping the dining table for the third time, as if preparing for something she couldn't quite name but had to be ready for. Upstairs, Lily and Sophie were getting dressed with uncommon excitement. They had picked out floral dresses on their own, Lily's blue with embroidered daisies, Sophie's pink with soft green leaves. Their hair had been carefully styled, Lily with her beloved braid, Sophie with her golden curls free under a cinnas. Simple headband. They kept glancing out the window every few minutes, as if the world might delay what their hearts knew was coming. Ethan, meanwhile, sat in the living room, pretending to organize papers that had no urgency. But his eyes kept drifting to the front door. Bringing Claire back hadn't been an easy decision. It meant acknowledging a mistake, yes, but it also meant admitting that letting her in wasn't just about the girls. It was about him. About breaking down the walls he'd built around himself. Then came the sound of tires on the gravel. The air seemed to pause. The girls' wheels spun fast across the stone path. When the gate opened and the black car pulled in, they leaned forward, eyes wide, and then she appeared. Claire stepped out calmly, wearing a soft light blue dress that swayed with the breeze and a beige knit cardigan that wrapped her like a gentle hug. Her honey blonde waves glowed in the morning sun. In her hands, a small paper bag. But it was her smile, wide, real, unguarded, that made the moment unforgettable. Claire. The girls shouted in unison, their voices full of emotion. She dropped the bag and knelt, wrapping them both in her arms. "I missed you so much," she whispered, her voice trembling just enough to betray the truth she'd tried to hold in. Lily squeezed her hand, as if needing proof she was really there. "We knew you'd come back. We never stopped believing." From the doorway, Ethan watched. The scene peeled away the weight of the past months and replaced it with something he couldn't name, something quiet and deep and right. When his eyes met Claire's, time seemed to stretch. No pride, no pretense, just a silent acknowledgement. "You belong here." In the days that followed, the change was undeniable. The mansion lived again, filled with laughter in the hallways, the smell of cookies in the kitchen, the sounds of wheels moving through the garden. Claire resumed the nightly readings, the creative therapy sessions, the afternoon games that ended in playful debates and joyful messes. Ethan, once a distant observer, started joining in. He stayed for the bedtime stories. He played. He pushed the girls through the garden paths. And when they tired, he sat with Claire on the porch to watch the sea. It was on one of those evenings that something quietly shifted between them. The girls were asleep. Claire sat in the glassed-in veranda, a blanket over her shoulders, eyes fixed on the horizon. Ethan approached without a word, carrying 2 steaming mugs. "I thought you might want some company," he said softly. She smiled, accepting the cup. "Thank you. I've always loved this sound. The ocean feels like it's speaking to us." "I think so too," he said, sitting beside her. "But sometimes it reminds me of everything I've lost, and everything I might still find." She didn't look at him, but her face said she felt the weight of those words. "I know what it's like to lose," she murmured. "And I know nothing replaces what's gone. We only build from what's left." These evening conversations became routine, gentle exchanges, sometimes light, sometimes raw. Claire spoke of her difficult childhood, how working at the shelter taught her to find joy in small victories. Ethan, in turn, revealed fears he'd never shared. The fear of failing as a father, of not being enough, of living behind masks to satisfy a world he no longer cared to impress. Their glances carried a new kind of tenderness, not polite, but searching, seeing. The boundary between gratitude and something more began to blur. Ethan no longer saw Claire as just the nanny or the woman who'd brought joy back to his daughters. He saw her as someone who understood silence, who honored the memory of his wife, yet gently created space for something new to bloom. One night, under a star-filled sky that mirrored the shimmer of the sea, he sat beside her, saying nothing for a long while. Then, almost a whisper, "Claire, I never imagined you'd come back, and that it would bring me peace." She turned to him, and the smile she gave was calm, almost conspiratorial. "Sometimes we only find what we truly need when we stop chasing what we think we want." Ethan didn't answer, but in that moment, he knew, with startling clarity, that the perfect plan he had clung to was gone. And for the first time, he was completely at peace with that. Spring had settled fully by the time that day arrived. A day that, though no one knew it yet, would mark a new chapter in the lives of everyone at the Caldwell mansion. Sunlight poured through the tall windows of the glass-walled veranda, spreading across the pale carpet of the main room, casting a soft warmth that contrasted with the fresh ocean breeze drifting in from outside. The waves rolled in their steady rhythm, as if the sea itself were holding its breath, waiting for something extraordinary. In the center of the room, Claire adjusted the parallel bars used for the girls' physical therapy. She had gotten up early to make sure everything was perfect, from the height of the bars tailored for each girl, to the cleared space around them for movement without fear. She wore a crisp white cotton shirt and comfortable pants, her blonde hair loosely tied, a few strands bouncing gently as she leaned in. Her expression was focused, but filled with hope. Lily and Sophie were already dressed, wearing light summer dresses. Lily's, a soft blue with tiny yellow flowers and her hair in a side braid. Sophie's, pale pink with delicate lace and her curls tucked back with a butterfly clip. Both were visibly nervous, their hands slightly sweaty as they gripped the bars. Ethan stood in the doorway, arms crossed, but far from his usual poised, composed demeanor. His gray-blue eyes revealed tension, expectation, and a heart full of memories. Of tears in sterile medical offices, of cold prognoses saying maybe they'd never walk. Of the days he had stopped believing, even when he didn't admit it. Claire knelt in front of them, looking each girl in the eye. "Today," she said gently, "don't think about what you couldn't do before. Think about what you can do now." Sophie took a deep breath, biting her lip. Lily glanced at her father, a silent search for reassurance, then returned her eyes to the bars. Claire stood beside Lily. Ethan, almost instinctively, went to Sophie's side. "Ready?" Claire asked, her smile full of quiet courage. "Ready," the girls answered in unison. The first step was unsteady. Lily moved her leg with effort, her face contorting slightly, but she didn't stop. Sophie, encouraged, mirrored the motion, her body swaying until her foot met the floor. The soft sound of those soles touching the ground filled the room with something grander than any symphony. "That's it, Lily." "Perfect. Sophie, keep going. You've got this," Claire encouraged, her voice calm but unwavering. Ethan leaned in, his heart racing. "You're doing amazing. Don't stop now." Another step, then another. Claire's eyes began to fill with tears, but she didn't falter. Lily's face lit up with pride. Sophie let out a nervous giggle, as if even she couldn't believe it. When they reached the end of the bars, Claire dropped to her knees and opened her arms. "Come to me." The girls shared a quick glance, a silent pact, and, without the bars, took 2 more steps before falling into her embrace. Claire held them tightly, burying her face in their hair, letting the tears fall without restraint. Ethan watched, unmoving at first. Then, as if something finally clicked into place, he stepped forward, knelt, and wrapped all 3 of them in his arms. "I'm so proud of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Lily lifted her face. "We couldn't have done it without Claire," Sophie added, with a smile brighter than the sunlight outside, "and without you believing in her, Daddy." And in that moment, Ethan understood. None of this had anything to do with social standing, last names, or polished plans. Family wasn't built through perfection or appearances. It was built through love, presence, and truth. Months later, Ethan and Claire would finally let the world see the quiet love that had grown between them. But even then, they never stopped talking about the girl's mother with affection and deep respect. Her photo remained in its place of honor in the twins' bedroom, a living reminder that love doesn't replace. It adds. And so they all learned, true home isn't built from pedigree, it's built from the heart. And sometimes, life's greatest wealth is found in the courage to begin again, right where loss once lived. And so, what did you think of this story? I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Drop your rating in the comments from 0 to 10 and let us know how much this story moved you. If it touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone special, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss more heartfelt stories like this one. And before you go, we've already picked another story, just for you, one that's even more emotional, and we're sure it'll touch you deeply.